Today we've got a very important video. It's all about Facebook and misinformation. Do you realise millions of people look at Facebook every day for information on how to do stuff? They go onto the groups, they get asked the questions, and then they get misinformation. I've anonymised it, but stay to the end and you'll find out what my conclusions are, and also what I think the guy can do now with the problem that he's got. Because I don't think that what he's done, although he's got himself a result, I'm not sure it's the full result that he'd like. Anyway, let's get on with it now. This is how the original post was shown, and we get on from there. KDD4 cassette deck that I got instead of a KDA7, rather difficult to get in Europe, sounds awful, really awful. It was sold as completely serviced, but it sounds essentially muffled no matter what kind of cassette it plays back. I have no idea if the reason is a worn head, simply because I don't know how worn heads actually look like. But one of the many experts here is likely to be able to give an opinion on this head, worn or not. So essentially what he's asking is this normal for headwear, and is this a worn head? Well, the question is, quite a valid question, and he's gone onto a cassette group to find out. Now, what worries me is the range of answers. As I say, I don't think anybody's trying to be awkward or malicious, but just look at the first answer. First answer he got was from a top contributor, and it says, try replacing the head. Pay attention to the inductance and resistance. The new head should match these parameters, which is true if you're going to change your head, but I'm not sure that's really the help that he needs here. I must say I was surprised that was the first answer, because I'd have put this one down, but I know that was the first answer because I went on to there shortly after it was posted. And this is the second response it's got in the way that Facebook now lists these things. So it says, adjust the azimuth angle of the head and you would be fine. Nothing needs to be changed. Well, I wouldn't have said that was necessarily the right answer, not straight off, because once you've touched the azimuth, how do you get it back? Anyway, then the next one says, and this one is from an all-star contributor, says, looks cleaner than mine, and mine sounds fine. Must be out of azimuth alignment. Plus, he is not a tech. He is going by the tapes recorded on another deck that could have been out of alignment the whole time. He needs to record from the D4 and play back from the D4, or at least use a pre-recorded reference tape to determine if it is his machine. I own a D4, D50, and honestly, they are just SPJ, silver plastic junk, compared to the mid-grade JVCs, including the 3-head D55, and I never recorded from these decks unless to listen at the huge difference in response for the hell of it. Recordings from my high-end units sound fine in those, but they were all aligned to reference tapes. Right, so this chap's obviously, he's giving sound advice insofar as he's saying you've got to not go fiddling with things effectively, and if you do, you've got to use an alignment tape. But maybe a little bit highbrow. Anyway, let's see what the next ones are. There's a lovely picture of head there, and then the top contributor says, it's not just the clean, once you check for the curvature across the head, if many tapes round across, it will flatten a bit of roundness of the head. And that's been followed by, yes, on that one, you will see a bit of an edge around the gap, so it could prevent some highs in playback. That was from Rising Contributor. I will take a wild guess at not worn. That's all you're going to get, a guess. How can anyone make an opinion with this kind of info? You have a choice, learn how to check for faults yourself, or take the deck to an experienced tech. Good luck. That's from another all-star contributor. Personally, I think that's a little bit hard. On to the next page. It's, as mentioned by others, adjust the azimuth. 9 out of 10 times it fixes. Heads look good to me. Followed by, which cassette brands and types did you use for recording? And then that's followed by, heads look fine and is likely fine. Check the azimuth. As others have noted, however, this is an entry-level deck for the time it was available. It is nowhere near a KDA7 and was always a little soft-sounding from an overall response. It would be fine in line with a KDA11 or KDA22, which also both had the Metaperm head, which was JVC's entry-level head. Not nearly as good as the SA heads. Well, what a pity that's what the chap hasn't got. All that information, none of it of any use to a novice. And a rising contributor says, no, don't replace the head. What tape are you trying to play on it? If the tape you are using was recorded on another deck, it is likely not in alignment with the head on this one. Try some pre-recorded cassettes. You can also turn the azimuth screw and align it to your tapes to make it sound good. Well, up until the last line, that contributor was doing very well. Now, from the author, it says, I've tried several pre-recorded cassettes as well as cassettes that were recorded with different tape. There are several recommendations to record a tape and then check to see if the sound is still bad. If the sound good, then it's apparently the wrong azimuth setting. I'll try that tomorrow. And a rising contributor says, yes, that sounds right. The adjusting screw is on the right side of the head. So now we have top contributor saying, check azimuth, demagnetize head block. In the bad scenario, maybe some caps are dry, but, presumably it means but, that rare to meet. Playhead looks fine, but as others have say, hard to determine to get just from picture. So now we're talking about getting azimuth alignment tapes and demagnetizing tools just to see if the head is worn. Top contributor says, head looks good, adjust the azimuth. And another top contributor says, only if you have an azimuth tape, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. And that gives you a reply now from the first top contributor who says, nope, you can do it by ear. Done that many times. Set your amplifier on mono, not stereo. That is my tip, and listen really good to the sound. So because he's done it wrong many times, he's recommending other people do it wrong. Rising contributor says, if you adjust the azimuth, then the tape no longer runs inside the wear groove. But the tape will try to do that because the wear groove will act as a tape guide. How good do you think that is going to sound? Unless the azimuth was recently misadjusted by someone else. So what he's saying is, if it was right when it was worn, then if you go altering it now, it's going to cause problems. If it was wrong when it was worn, then you're never going to get it right. So yeah, valid point here from Rising Contributor, but that's not answering the question. Now another top contributor says, exactly so. Glad I'm not the only one to point this out. It's never a good idea to touch the azimuth settings which just develop a groove over use, regardless of if it's right or not. When I need to adjust the azimuth in such a situation, I go the long way by removing the head, lapping it to restore a smooth surface, and then I put it back in the deck whilst being free to readjust the azimuth the most proper way, with a proper calibration tape, of course. P.S. Of course, I don't advise to try to lap a head to those who aren't just expert about this matter. The risk to ruin the head for good is just too high if you make a mistake while lapping. So there's good information there. So he's not actually giving information that isn't needed. He's just explaining why the problem isn't as simple as it could be. I'll expand the 6 replies. Now author, top contributor, says, since I'm anything but an expert, replacing belts and idlers is what I'm actually able to do. I took a record with the KD4, played it and did so flawlessly. I assume that means so. So I dared to touch the azimuth, turning the recording screw by about 540 degrees actually did the job. The KD4 is certainly not a state-of-the-art cassette deck, but now it sounds pretty good. Not having any kind of calibration tapes, I had to use my ears. The result is absolutely acceptable for me, though I'm aware that professional work would have led to a better result. Rising Contributor says, I guess somebody messed with it then long after most of the wear groove was already developed. Check if the deck does not make tracks or other damages on the tape you play with it. So it's good advice there, saying that having run the tape through a couple of times, make sure there aren't lines on it you weren't expecting, because there should be no lines on the tape. If there is, then there's something wrong. And the authors have come back and said, thanks for that hint, I will certainly check. Top contributor says, in my humble opinion, IMHO, turning an azimuth screw by 540 degrees is quite a lot. Cannot believe it was set so wrong in the factory. Either someone messed with it at some point, or you should visually see if it's been misaligned with the tape path, even by naked eye, from a proper point of view. There is also another possible option. Let's assume the azimuth was geometrically okay, but there is some kind of tape transport problem, so that the tape travels not just parallel. This way you were forced to turn the azimuth that much to get the right sound. And yet another obvious option, the tape you use to align your azimuth isn't reliable for that task, and maybe some more possible situations. As you can see, tape transport is a complex matter, full of variables, and to just find the actual reason for a given problem is far from being a simple task. So somebody says, I have a set of those heads for the JVC KD-D4 cassette deck, and under there, Rising Contributors, has looked good to me, do what said first. If that doesn't help, try what everyone else said. And somebody says, Super Q. And then somebody says, Rising Contributor, a different one, says, is noise reduction system switched off? Question mark. Then the author says, with Dolby B or C enabled, it sounds even much worse. So now we have, could be electronic PB check power supplies with oscilloscope. Dolby IC can be defective. I had DBX IC PB on a Technics RSB33W. One that says definitely needs azimuth adjustment. That is the angle of the head on the tape. It's calibrated by the factory, but if someone messed with it, the tapes will sound muffled. How to do it? Use a non-magnetic screwdriver, take off the front cover of the tape door. If you can't reach the head screws, pop in the best sounding pre-recorded tape that you have, hit play and easily adjust the left screw on the playback head until the sound is the brightest. Then pop some other pre-recorded tapes in to check that they sound the same. Also make sure that Dolby is set to off. Well, that works quite well actually if you are just trying to sort of ascertain whether something's not quite right. But it's not actually the cure. But if you do this, if it didn't need doing, you're gonna have now messed it up. Now we have somebody saying, as extra info, worn heads usually have a gap left by the passing tape, and it's visible. And you can also feel it if you touch the head with your finger. That won't make tape sound muddy, but even crisper. No need to change the head, just align azimuth. The proper way to do this is with a 10 kHz azimuth alignment tape and an oscilloscope. But you can also do it by the way I explained in my previous answer. So now we have another top contributor who says, looks mint, but that's no guarantee that it's clean. Having serviced literally thousands of decks in the past 60 years, only one looked like this and fit your description. I cured it by polishing the head with Duraglit. Got it up to snuff in 30 seconds or less. If the azimuth is off, you'd be able to record a tape and play it back unmuffled. Only tapes recorded on other decks would sound muddy. Well, that's exactly right, so no problem with that at all. And now we have one from a top contributor, and it says, do not adjust the azimuth, try a recording, and if that plays well, then maybe adjust the azimuth if you have a good tape as a reference. Azimuth is only relevant if playing tape not recorded on this deck. This is not just a quick tweak, it has to be done properly. And there's a link to a YouTube channel, and oh, that looks a bit like mine. That would be the one. But anyway, it tells you how to adjust the azimuth on there if you don't know how to do it, and if you haven't got the proper test equipment to do it. And then following that, there is another contributor has said, Rising Contributor, if you have no test equipment, play a tape and adjust the azimuth while it's playing until the highs come back. It's a very easy adjustment and can be done by ear. It may not be perfect, but it will be close and usable. The screw may be locked with lacquer, and you will need a little force at first. Turning the screw has a sweet spot, and treble will come back when the head is aligned better on the tape. Now, there is only one thing wrong with that Rising Contributors bit there, which is if the screw was locked with lacquer, then I definitely would be looking for other reasons for it to be wrong, because the only reason that a head would be wrong if it's still locked from the factory is because it's been bashed or something, in which case you're looking at other problems. But yeah, essentially what he's saying is right, and it agrees with what mine would have done. But there are better ways of doing it than all this do it by ear. Why does everybody want to use their ears? And another one says, before you play around with azimuth, first make a new recording with the deck and see if it has the same problem. If it sounds much better, yes, it might be azimuth. Don't just wildly turn adjustment screws, rather have it done by a pro. Well, obviously I agree with that. What I would like to point out though is that my comment, the one at the top here, was actually the third one on the post of the original author. And the way Facebook now do all this shuffling and stuff, it's very hard to get a chronological order. Anyway, as you can see, mine says 1 day, and some of the stuff we've already looked at said 15 hours or so. So, it's really weird the way they do that. Here we have another top contributor, and it says, looks just fine. Maybe it's alignment or electronics. So that's just literally a simple answer to the simple question. Another one says, I repeat, do not adjust the heads first. Find yourself a few different tapes. Try several different tapes to see what they sound like. Get a new blank tape and do some recordings and compare recordings from different brands of tape. Do some troubleshooting. These heads are in excellent condition. If you start messing with the alignment, then that wasn't the original problem. Then you've just created one more problem. There are any number of reasons why things are not sounding correct. Absolutely, positively, don't start off with one of the most difficult things there is to adjust. Look for the simple problems first. And I must say, I totally agree with what he said. It looks like not worn at all. Check the azimuth and tape path and electrolytes in EQ circuit. Where goes the coaxial cable from the playback head? Demagnetize head if you can find the demagnetizer tape. So suddenly we're talking about taking the thing apart and checking components and things, and this was for the answer to the question, is this head worn? Rising contributor says, so TDK-SA-X and the sound is muffled. Also, you paid for a full service deck. The only choice is you find a repair shop for the repair of your deck. I think these were the 4 answers that were in the submenu anyway. It says, if you record a cassette tape and then listen to it and it sounds good, it can be the azimuth. And that was originally written in Spanish, so we'll excuse the spelling, no problem there. Then somebody else says, heads could be misaligned. Well, that's azimuth, I suppose. Then the next one says, not worn, seems perfect, azimuth adjustment needed. And that's just a statement. Yeah, that's fine. And then the top contributor says, don't adjust anything if you don't know what you're doing. When you say it sounds terrible and lacking high frequency, you might want to try a wand-type head demagnetizer first. Oh, he was doing so well. Do not go in with a wand-type head demagnetizer because it's a bit like riding a bike. If you've never ridden a bike before and you get on a bike, you're almost certainly going to fall off and hurt yourself. Well, using a demagnetizer is something you have to practice at. It's easy to ride a bike when you know what you're doing. It's easy to use a demagnetizer when you know what you're doing. But it's not easy to learn. So try it out elsewhere. I'll do the video on it. And we have another person who says, replace the head. Well, does anybody wonder where you're going to get these heads from? And have you got all the equipment necessary to align, calibrate and set them up? I don't think so. And now from all-star contributor, as others said, adjust azimuth, but do it by ear, using a good pair of headphones. Use few original cassettes for this, or whatever cassette you want to hear well. You do not need azimuth tape or other, just a good fitting screwdriver. Head is good and very tough. Now we have another Spanish one, and it says the head is out of balance. It's without azimuth. There is the problem. There is no way to calibrate it because the azimuth bolt is missing. Brackets azimuth. Now looking at that, he's showing what looks like an azimuth bolt. I don't know if that's on the original photo or what, but it's... You can't say things like that because the guy's been playing the thing. And because of the silly way that Facebook put the timelines on this now, it says author, top contributor, oh wow, thank you, I guess it's not possible to replace it. And that's been answered with, better search and buy another one. These times it's very hard to find those pieces. Good luck with your search. You know what you need to check well before you buy. That was in Spanish again, that one. Then the author has said, I looked for some other pictures of that section in the internet. It looks in fact that there's a part missing. O face and grumpy face. All-star contributor. The head looks good, at least not too bad. At a bad head you'll see the gap, or very uneven worn traces. The problem is most likely the service which was done. Even if not the creme de la creme top deck, it must still sound grateful. Note, especially Nakamichi owners report often, after they gave it to experts for service, it did not sound well anymore. When I could help them, it was sounding very good as never before. There is a small difference between these two cases in quality, amount of work and the time spent on the service, as well as having the right clue how to service and the necessary resources. Especially the last point is not fulfilled for most broadband service shops. I guess what he's saying is it takes time to do it right and you have to be careful with it. And now we have another Dolby hater. Is Dolby switched off? And the answer was, with Dolby B or C enabled, it sounds even worse. Which, if you understand how Dolby works, you would expect it to be so, specifically if you're playing a tape that isn't Dolby encoded and you don't know if it is or not. But anyway, that's to be expected. Now we have another rising contributor says, does it play back tapes okay that have been recorded on it? And the answer from the author is, thanks, that's exactly what I will do today. Seems to be a way to find out if the azimuth calibration or something else. Now this is due to the way Facebook do this time thing again. It makes very little sense. So as a rising contributor has continued and says, has it been switched off for a long time? I didn't use one of my cassette decks for months. When I did it sounded very dull and closed in, but after a while it returned to normal. And the author has said, I was told that it had been in use and was also serviced since I it was in use for several hours. Me trying to figure what's wrong with it. I think he said, since I have it, it's been in use for several hours, me trying to figure what's wrong with it. And Rising Star replies, good internet cables can make a difference, but cheap ones shouldn't be that dull. I don't think internet cables are a problem here. That's just a red herring. So here we go again. Another top contributor says, try manually adjusting the head azimuth screw. And the author says, thanks, I'll try when it's clear that the tapes that are recorded with the deck can be played back flawlessly. Then, so I learned from the replies here, it's the azimuth setting. So the good news here is that the author is taking stuff on board and filtering it. The bad news is there's so much to filter. Another top contributor says, looking at the condition of all heads and capstans, I would not think this deck has seen excessive use. And a rising contributor says, told you correctly, my advice is to fully clean tape path 2 with isopropyl. The head could be polished smoothly with Zep Top or Ac Fix for stainless steel gently if you top it with ear stick and do rotational moves to the head no longer than 3 minutes. In that way you'll remove thin layer of flit, rust, and vocals highs will be present after the process. I did it 2 times on my Technics M230 and on my Akai GX75 with great results. So that's actually not bad advice, I guess. That's give it a bit of a clean, and if it's looking a bit manky, try a little bit of gentle polishing with metal polish. I wouldn't go that far straight away, but it's certainly something to be thinking about. A top contributor says, to me, even if there's a light wear groove, it's nothing which could justify a muffled sound, so as far as wear, the head is still okay. As a side note, the head is a nice hard permalloy head with 6 laminas per channel, visible thanks to one of your nice pictures, and with parabolic shape, looks like Alps made. Good stuff in the pick, an Alps C83S head, never used. I own it as a spare with same laminas and guard laminas configuration, hard permalloy as well. And it does look nice. And we got another contributor who says, could also need the head adjustment and the magnetization. And finally, the original poster put up an edit and let us know how he got on. So it says, edit, problem solved, thumbs up, heart, thumbs up. A huge thank you to the many people here that were trying to help and even invested their time figuring, analysing and comparing the head with similar heads. So I did exactly what was recommended by the majority of experts here. 1. Took a record with the KD4. 2. Played it back on the same deck. 3. Noticed that the playback was almost flawless. 4. Put in a really good record from another deck into the KD4. 5. Played it and turned the azimuth screw with the demagnetized screwdriver until it sounded good. And it does. Had to turn the screw for 540 degrees. I guess that's quite a lot. That's almost 2 turns. Number 6, clap my hands in the direction of this awesome group for enabling me to fix that deck. Well, that's great news, and I'm really glad for the bloke. It really, he's had a lot of information thrown at him, most of which was not necessarily relevant, and it had to be done in the right order. But, well done. Anyway, I'll pop up and I'll give you a conclusion. Well, as you've seen from that, there's a lot of misinformation on that. It's all It's all so silly. The answers, there were several of them were correct, which was record a tape and see if it plays back fine. If it does, you know you've got an azimuth problem. But then you always get the bloke who's going to say, oh, you've got to demagnetise it. And then you get the guy who's saying, oh, replace the head. And you've got the other guy who's saying, well, relap the head and all this sort of thing. I mean, the fact is, quite simply, if you've got a tape deck that's been set up in the factory and you're playing it back and it's muffled, unless somebody's fiddled with it, there's going to be a reason. And the reason could be one of many things. So somebody said electronics, which is true. Or it could be tape path, which is true. Or it could be anything, which is true. So the thing is, you have to go through a process. So you've got a machine that's supposedly good. You record a tape on it and you play back the tape, and the tape plays back fine. You now know the electronics aren't a problem, and you know that the physicality of it's not a problem. It hasn't chewed the tape, so that's fine. What you don't know is why, when you play a tape from another machine or a pre-recorded tape, why it's muffled. So at this point, you then have to look and say, well, has the head been altered? If the head has been altered by any means, then that's where your problem's going to have started. But if it hasn't and you start altering it, you've now made a new problem. As one of the other posters said. So stick it to the procedure. You record it, it plays back fine. You look at the head, you look to see if the seal has been broken, because there is always a seal around the actual head. If that has not been broken, then you're looking to see why the head's out of alignment without having broken the seal. So that could be that it's got bashed at some point, maybe somebody's been heavy-handed loading in the tapes. Whatever it is, you've got to look. But you're also looking for pinch rollers that are not running true, because if the azimuth is playing back wrong, it means that the tape is passing the head incorrectly compared to its original one. So it's probably going to be, in this case, nice and simple. It's the azimuth has been set wrong. Whoever said they serviced it, well, they didn't. They just mucked about with it, fiddled with it. Whatever the guy was using as his reference when he set it up wasn't right. So the new owner's now got the problem. It doesn't work very well. I've got signal generators, I've got oscilloscopes, I've got proper azimuth alignment tapes, and I've got the tools, the brass non-metallic tools to be able to set up azimuth. Do you need to do all that? Not if you're a punter and you're just trying to get some use out of a deck. If you're going to start using it for proper stuff, then maybe you do. But if you're just a normal member of the public and all you want to do is play back your tapes nicely, then what you've got to do is get yourself a good playback tape. Now, I would always recommend not one from another deck that you just happen to have knocking around, unless you've got thousands of tapes recorded on that deck, in which case maybe it's a good idea. But get yourself a reference tape. Now, by reference, I mean one you can refer to. So get yourself a tape, something like a Mantovani tape, where there's nice strings and high levels, and you play that back and you adjust it as it was suggested on playback using a screwdriver. But why is everybody using their ears? How many people have not got one of these? How many people have not got one of these? It's called a mobile phone. Putting it down before it goes biddy biddy bip. Your mobile phone has got a very good amplifier and pickup in it. They actually, if you have hearing aids, they actually use the microphone in the camera in your mobile phone, and they use the sound generator in your mobile phone to calibrate your hearing aids. I know that for a fact because I've been looking at it. And therefore, you've got yourself in your hand a very good audio and analytics device. Use it. Don't play it back until your ears think it sounds right. Play it back until the phone thinks it sounds right. Get yourself a Spectrum Analyzer app. It's free. Load it in. Play it back on a decent set of speakers, or even through your headphones. Put your mobile, I'm not going to pick up the mobile phone again, but assuming that was a mobile phone, put your speakers, your headphones around the mobile phone, and just so you can see the display, and adjust using that. Don't use your ears. Your ears are the most unreliable thing in the whole audio chain. You get into a noisy car and you drive around for a while and the noise goes away. Why? The car isn't any less noisy. It's just that you get used to it. So use something that you've got in your hand. If you need to generate some tones, use the phone. It's simple. Having then played it back, done all that, it's great. You've got a machine that you can now use. It will not be calibrated to proper specifications. There will be people on the group who were on there saying, you've got to use the proper tapes, you've got to use this, that and the other. And they're not wrong. But if you're just wanting to get the use out of a deck, adjust it properly, but don't use your ears, use your phone. Everybody's got one. If you haven't, well, how are you watching this? Yeah. You're using a computer. There's an answer. Use your computer. They've got sound analyzer apps. Do that. Adjust it up properly, and then you've got yourself sorted. But do be careful. One of the guys did mention if the tape is going to run over a groove, it may actually crease the tape. So having set everything up, make sure everything's clean, do run a tape that you're not that fussed about through a couple of times. Just make sure it's not damaging it. Because if you've got a problem with your pinch rollers, it could be riding up and it could be put in a crease on the top of the tape. The other thing, of course, is to make sure that the tapes that you use are not jamming. And that's a different problem, different story. Anyway, I'll leave you with that. If you got anything out of this video, please like and subscribe and pass the word around, and I'll catch you another time. Cheers. Bye-bye.